Hi, and welcome to the Rare Business Podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm a consultant, advisor, researcher, and writer on all things related to customer service and customer experience. Through this podcast, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, and leading thinkers about what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees in this fast-moving modern age that we live in. If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then welcome, and please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsko.com, as I've now completed over 250 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then thank you for returning, and I'll aim to do a good enough job to keep you coming back week after week. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Dan Simpson, who is Chief Executive Officer of Tazikis. Hey, Dan, how you doing?
I'm great. Great to be with you today. I'm excited for the conversation.
Fantastic. So, Dan, for the benefit of our listeners and also readers, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and also about the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So my life has been kind of a curvy road of lots of entrepreneurial projects, startups, and helping companies grow from in different industries, actually. So starting really in healthcare, moving to some supply chain, even pharmaceuticals, worked to help lead a mobile app company, and then found my way into hospitality. And which was really, restaurants and hospitality wasn't really on my bucket list, but I found that it's an amazing industry that at its best is very people centric, and I think in light of the real food movement, there was a lot of things that attracted me to it, and like many other industries, it was sort of starting to catch up in terms of technology, and so it hit a lot of chords for me, and I found my way to a great concept called Tazikis Mediterranean Café. And so, yeah, these days, I've been with the brand now for, in part for a little over 5 years, initially as with a project that made me a franchisee. Tazikis grows through an entrepreneurial model. We definitely believe in local ownership and them being connected in the community. And so I came into this through our parent company called Fresh Hospitality that finds young, talented entrepreneurs in the food spectrum, whether farmers or chefs, and helps them grow. And so Fresh Hospitality helped our founder, Keith and Amy Richards, 21 years ago, came back from Greece, and they were inspired to launch this new concept. And so I joined them in that a little over 5 years ago as a franchisee, helped launch a Tazikis, and really fell in love with the founder, the ethos of the food and the brand. And then the parent company asked me to join as the Chief Innovation Officer at that time, a little over 3.5 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that was a key time because they were coming up on their 20-year anniversary, and they were having great reflective conversations about what parts of us do we want to keep and never change? What parts of us do we want to innovate, and to make sure that we both never lose our soul, but also stay in pace with how the world is changing around us. And so I became as the Chief Innovation Officer. We launched some really exciting projects, put together the beginnings of a 5-year plan, and they asked me to stay on as the CEO, and that's the role I serve in today.
Perfect. Now, I know a little bit about Tazikis' story and some of the interesting things that you're doing to sort of both enhance and differentiate the experience that your customers get. And I wanted to ask you about some of them just to basically kind of flesh out the story a little bit, if that's okay.
Let's do it.
Then, so the first thing I'd like to ask you about is you've got this thing, and it's called, I think I'm gonna get the pronunciation right. It's called eudaimonia.
Yes.
And I was a bit like, what is that? And I mean, what is it? And how did you come across it? And how do you create it, bring it to life in a restaurant? I mean, it might be simple after you tell me what it is, but first of all, tell me what it is.
Yeah. So, so this it's a Greek word, eudaimonia, and its history is really fascinating. But first I'll share the setting. When I first got there, started to meet with Keith, the founder. And again, I was going back to tell me the story about how this happened. And they shared about how he and his wife, they went to Greece, really on a romantic getaway. And a few days in, they stumbled upon this little cafe. And outside there was this husband and wife that turned out to be the owners of this cafe. And they were welcoming people in, insisting that you try your food. And they were enticed. They went in, and hours passed, and they had this amazing, colorful food that was so flavorful, and wine, and felt like a party. They felt like family. And they walked out with this sensation of what just happened. Like, it was amazing food, but it was more than that. What was that thing? And they loved their experience so much, they went back to that same cafe every night for the rest of their trip. And
nice.
On the flight back to the States, they looked at each other and said, this is it. This is what we want to do with our life. This is our calling. We want to import not only the food, the healthy Mediterranean food and lifestyle, but really that experience that where they felt like they were welcomed in and then treated like family. And so I was searching for what is that essence? What is the term, the word to capture what they experienced, not just the food, but the overall experience. And so sometimes it helps to look into the history books. And so lo and behold, if you look at Greek history, there was a discussion a few millennia ago where this gentleman named Aristotle jumped into a conversation where they were debating, how do you achieve lasting happiness, right? And some said hedonism. It's just like, look, life is short. This is all you got. Grab as much as you can. Consume. At the cost of everything and everyone, just consume. Others said, no, sadly, there is no happiness this side of the afterlife. And so live a simple life and don't even attempt to achieve happiness. And Aristotle chimed in and found this middle place, this sort of non-dual thinking place in the middle where he said, no, there is lasting happiness. There is a way to live the good life. And that is when you start by finding out how you're wired, what your passion and gifts are in the world. And then you live that out in community with others that are doing the same thing. And he used the specific language about when you live a life like that, you will gather around a table and you will celebrate your highs and your lows. And there's no better place to sort of express this word that he offered to the world, which is eudaimonia, or as they say in Greece, eudaimonia, which literally means lasting happiness from living an authentic life in community. It has also been translated in some of the American founding documents about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean fleeting happiness like a new pair of shoes that breaks and goes, or an ice cream cone that melts. It's lasting happiness that even after the meal, you have conversation, memories, connections that are formed when you live life in this way. And so Aristotle brought this into the world, into Greek culture, and that's really the foundation of Greek culture, and has really bled into the whole Mediterranean area. And that really explains the heartbeat of the Mediterranean lifestyle. Like, it starts with people live multi-generationally in communities. Mm-hmm. People walk, exercise as a part of their life. And then you add food that is, fundamentally local, and seafood and vegetables and fruits. And then there's a little bit less meat. And then there's a little bit of, red wine and local wine. And at the very top, there's just a little bit of sweet. And it really ended up being a philosophy and a model that has served that region of the world very well, and very much at the heartbeat of what we're doing. And so your second question was like, how do you live that out?
Well, indeed. That all sounds great, but it's like going, what does that mean in practical terms? Yeah,
so we found a way to express what they experience. And so for us, we centered on these three ideas that from the beginning that Keith and Amy really got. And that was make extraordinary food that is in line with, the real food movement. We still make food from scratch 21 years later. We do it the hard way because we believe it's worth it. And then it's build relationships. And so we don't look at our customers from the perspective of they hand us a $10 bill and we hand them a meal and it's a transaction. Instead, it's very genuinely about, we're a fabric in the community where we believe that great food brings people together. And so we look at the opportunity to build relationships, not just produce great food and serve it to them in a more sterile manner. And then lastly is serve the community, right? So this idea of servant leadership and this posture of, we're there to then find all of the other parts of the community that matter. And that is everyone from, the teachers and the schools and their families, the police and the fire departments, the local businesses. And then we've also, from the beginning, really sought out who are the members of the community that kind of get left out.
Right.
We'll talk more about that, but it's been a center piece of our business in making sure that we are truly serving the community. So that's who we look for, people that naturally that they recognize we're in the people business first, and food is a mechanism to bring people together. So we hire those kind of people, and then we practice living that out in the restaurant and in the community.
Perfect. So I also going to notice that, because I think about the restaurant and hospitality kind of business and the eudaimonia and kind of the things that you're trying to create there. We also noticed that you've recently seen like a 200% increase in online and to-go orders rather. And that made me think about, well, one, is that impacting the footfall in the restaurant, and then also your ability to deliver the eudaimonia?
Yeah, great question. So it's very fascinating to see how much generational shifts are pushing really many industries, right? And so now, for the first time, convenience has been prioritized above quality and price even.
Yeah.
And so, right. So the proliferation of delivery companies is probably the most visible sign of this. But we've just seen our customers. I think our customers have always been on the go.
Right.
So like my wife and I, we have 3 kids, and two of them are in soccer, and one is in ballet and school programs and whatever. So there are moments where we get to have food as a destination, where that's
right.
quiet moments. But most of life is lived on the go, and food is something we get between point A and point B. So yeah, we have seen, from the time I got involved, we've seen off-premise dining, we would call it, which includes catering and takeout and curbside and delivery. We've seen that go from 20 to 25% of our business, and now it's more than 50%. To your point.
Wow.
So it's interesting. Our traffic is up. Our foot traffic is actually up, and that's partially due because that's a combination of our dine-in and takeout. And so people are ordering on the mobile app or online. They're still coming in the restaurant. They still have a few minutes experience in the 4 walls. And
right.
So our overall traffic is up, but certainly there's a shift towards off-premise dining and delivery. And your question is great, which is, well, how do you maintain connection? That's our first brand value, is connection. We want people that are caring and engaging.
Of course.
How do you be caring and engaging with guests if before you had an hour with them and now you sometimes have 15 seconds with them?
Right.
And so a lot of it is we're trying to get to the essence of what is the point of those moments. And I think it starts with mindfulness, with presence, and something as simple as, eye contact and paying attention.
Right.
So we look and say, okay, if it's a curbside order and we're going to make it, the first thing is that we're intentionally going to make this with love. We are going to realize there's a real human being, a real family, a real business group that is going to actually pick up this food and eat this shortly. And we teach mindfulness around let's create this food and this plate and this meal in such a way that it is nourishing to someone. And so mindfulness about how it's put together so that every detail matters. The second part is, even if you only have 15 seconds, stop for a moment and look them in the eyes and recognize, once again, this is a person that is either having a great day, and let's celebrate with them, or they're having a really crappy day, and let's be able to be gentle and empathetic in the way we interact. And if you pay attention for just a minute, we live in such a busy world where I don't know if you ever noticed this at a dinner party, right? And think about dinner parties you've been to, and we raise our glass to cheers, whatever it is, and half the world just kind of looks away as we cheers.
Yeah.
And my wife and I are in this supper club, this dinner club, and we've formed this discipline around when we cheers, we intentionally look each other in the eyes and say, look, I'm not just cheersing, I'm cheersing you. And so intentional practice there. So we're trying to teach this idea and live out this idea that even if it's only 15 seconds, if you drop off a curbside order in someone's vehicle, look them in the eye, look around the car. Are there 2 or 3 kids in there? And offer them some extra napkins if it's an overwhelmed mom, or if it's a businessman that's clearly in a serious conversation and or rushed. the best way we can sort of love that person in that moment is actually don't get in their way. So just pay attention to what's going on, and don't have a scripted response, but have a genuine, spontaneous response to what you're observing. That's the best way to sort of live out, eudaimonia in that moment.
Perfect. Thank you for that. I mean, but like you said, it's like we live in a busy world, and you've talked about, or I mentioned that, you've seen this 200% increase in online and to-go orders, and that's about 50% of your business now, and that's probably going to go in peaks and troughs. It's not going to happen at the same time. And so I guess my question is going to be, that's all great in principle, but how do you stay on track, or how do you help your people stay on track with that type of habit or that type of behavior when things just get hectic, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. So you, like any principles you're trying to live out, right? You don't live them out perfectly, but I mean, for us, it is started with, starts all the way back with finding the right people, right? So our recruitment and training practices, we've really doubled down our efforts there to find more of the right people that just naturally embody these behaviors and live them out. It's a much better approach than trying to find people that don't and trying to talk them into this is the way they should live. So for us, it really starts with finding the right people and then train them. So every single person that comes into the company, first thing they're going to hear is a message from Keith, the founder, about the story of the brand and how from day one we are trying to live out eudaimonia. And then we have 5 brand values, and we are recruiting based on these 5 brand values, but we're also teaching them right from the beginning. So before they learn how to be a cashier or a line cook, that's key. If you can create a baseline, at least for your culture, that helps. And then I think beyond that is every time when you get it right, it's celebrated. And when you get it wrong, it's okay. It's a conversation with the team to talk about, okay, this just happened and this order was wrong. We messed it up, or it was late. How do we make it right to this person that's, again, not just following like a corporate policy, but how do we make it right to them in a way that's a little more personalized? I think your other question about mobile ordering, we're thrilled that we're able to support our guests in the way they want, which is they're used to tap, 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 and have it delivered. I can pick it up curbside. I can walk in the restaurant and pick it up if I'd like. And so that puts pressure on. We've got to be creative with our UI, UX, our user experience inside this new digital 4 walls. Mm-hmm. And that you got to pay attention to. Some things are, like, I used to run a mobile app company, and you want the fewest clicks or taps as possible. You want the imagery to evoke an emotion that is similar to when they walk in the 4 walls. We've had a major, another element for us in the 4 walls is we've had a major project to refresh all of our locations. Mm-hmm. And that's moving from kind of an old world Greek to a new, brighter, younger coastal Mediterranean that incorporates blue and white and, baskets and lights, and really exemplifies our menus. We created this new experience in the store. And so working really hard that how do you make that mobile app experience feel as much like that as possible and to be as engaging. And so conveying some of that heart through digital is a little harder, right? Sure. That's our attention is in the 4 walls, in the digital experience, and then also out in the community. Those are all sort of ways we're trying to live that out.
Okay. So I wanted to go back to something that you said earlier on around kind of the eudaimonia and, living and taking care of the community around you. And you also mentioned about particularly, the people that are sometimes less fortunate than ourselves. Because that reminded me of, another thing that I know you're involved with, but it's something that I've written about before, because I recently wrote a piece on my Forbes column about a great service encounter I had with a hotel employee at a Novotel in India when I was there a couple of months ago, who could neither hear nor speak. It was a wonderful. I had a wonderful, experience with that young man, but it occurred to me that we don't see enough, or don't see many or enough kind of disabled employees in the service or hospitality industries. I mean, before we get onto what you're doing, I mean, it would be interesting to get your view on why do you think that is?
Yeah, you're teasing out something, such an amazing opportunity. I mean, I think first and foremost that that there's too much fear for what was not familiar, right? And so, particularly when you're talking about someone that has fallen in this category of special needs, right?
Yeah.
And we try to focus not on their disabilities but their abilities.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about someone that has probably outside of some social norms and expectations that we're used to. And when we spend some time, when you spend some time with someone that is on the spectrum, or that can't communicate in the exact same way, has yes some limitations. The problem is it makes us uncomfortable, and
Sure.
we're not used to interacting with people that fall outside this little tiny box of acceptability. It evokes fear, and people would rather not engage with that. And the sad thing is that, ironically, when you take away, a sense, the other senses become more active and more dynamic. In the
Sure.
same way, someone has a disability, their abilities are all the more remarkable. And what we have found, as we've been leaning into actively hiring special needs youth and adults, is that, man, we talked about eudaimonia and this idea of lasting happiness. There is an immense amount of joy that comes into our restaurants. So we become all pent up and professional, and you hire one person with special needs, and they will walk in, and while all the staff is a little uncomfortable at first, this individual will walk up and will just unabashedly hug everyone and right to their face say, "You're beautiful," and I love you. And there's no filter on their joy and their love. And we're all wise to become students of anyone who has special needs, because their abilities outshine their disabilities, and they bring so much joy and love into our environment that we're all better off. And then the guests have the same experience. They come in and they're like, well, this person looks a little bit different, or they talk a little bit different. What's going on here? And then they recognize that they have this amazing human experience with this other person. They walk out with a smile on their face, and they realize, wait, we're the ones that are missing it. We're the ones with the disability of being so pent up and not being able to share joy as much as so many in the special needs community are. So I think that's why, and I think we have an amazing opportunity. We have this crazy idea that Keith is leading now with our Hope Project, to say, what if every restaurant hired even one special needs person? You could create 1 million jobs for a group of people that often get left out, and really one of their hardest challenges is finding a job. And they don't have a problem keeping a job because they're an amazing asset once they're hired.
Sure.
But getting beyond the uncomfortability of that, I think is an amazing opportunity for all of us to pay attention to and create some jobs along the way.
Fantastic. So tell me about the Hope Initiative, because that sounds pretty amazing. I mean, and well, yeah, tell me about it, because it's like, I'm interested. I think it's an incredible sort of idea, and it's got incredible potential. But I just wanted to, I'd like to understand a bit more about it. I'd like you to share a bit more about it, because I mean, when you tell the story, then hopefully it's going to, either make some people uncomfortable or kind of inspire others to pull their socks up and get off their arse and do something else about themselves.
I like it. I like your call to action. So yeah, so Hope. So Keith Richards, our founder, and a lady from a local public school named Cindy Vincent. They partnered up years ago and created the Hope Project, which stands for Herbs Offering Personal Enrichment. And in our world, inspired by the Mediterranean diet, right? Herbs are not just a garnish or a side. Herbs are mixed into everything. We have a vast array of herbs. They define the flavor of the Mediterranean dish. And so we buy a lot of herbs. And so this idea of, well, what if we partner with the either local public schools, or in some cases we're launching our own greenhouses, growing the herbs that we need for the local restaurants. And some markets we have 2 or 3 restaurants, some markets we have 10. And we basically have a program where all of the herbs we launch a greenhouse.
we partner with local special needs individuals. We essentially we hire them to and teach them how to plant and water and harvest and bag all of the herbs that we use in our restaurants. And we get local, the most fresh and local produce and herbs in this category. And that makes our food taste better. And they get the opportunity to be mentored and a job that they pay them for.
Yeah.
And so it's an amazing win-win. And then every store then hires at least one of these special needs individuals to work in the store. And so there's a connection of growing herbs and also bringing that in the store. And then the opposite as well is true as well, which is then you get to take your staff and you get to go out to the greenhouse and to the herb farm, and they get to see where our produce comes from, and they get to participate in this. And so it's connecting our staff and our guests back to the origins of food. It's connecting this left out, kind of the least of these in our community, giving them dignity through a job, giving them importance, and they're celebrated in our stores and our community. So we're excited for the Hope Project, and yes, our goal now is we have move towards having every one of the Tazikis participate in this program fully. We are now branching out in a few ways. So one is, let's challenge the world around us. What if every restaurant did this? It's not a hard project, and it's a real win-win. But beyond that, there's very related things too. We've partnered with a greenhouse farm called Cultivate, CUL, the number 2, Vate, Cultivate. You can look them up online. Joey Langford, amazing guy. And he's growing produce for us, starting in the Nashville, Tennessee market, growing tomatoes and cucumbers and a variety of other local produce. And all of the individuals he hires are basically, this is a recovery process for them. They are coming out of addiction, or they're coming out of incarceration, and they are on their way back to being a contributing citizen, and agriculture is a path to get there. So it's just another opportunity. And one last one I'll share is, I'm also really passionate, probably 20% or more of our workforce come from another country, right? They're refugees or immigrants in the States, they're first generation, Americans. And this is true around the world, right? Our countries are melting pots, and it makes us stronger to be more diverse and dynamic. And so we're really proud of how they have shaped Tazikis. And so one of our recruitment projects is also working with organizations that help job placements for refugees and immigrants. And so those are just 3 examples, whether special needs or people that are in transition and recovery, or that are new to our shores, to be able to be inclusive and provide a job. And it gives us, and they are all in all 3 of those cases, notice the commonality. They are all so grateful to have a job. They are all, and therefore, and that gratitude spills out into every interaction, every facial expression and eye contact with a guest. And so these are some of the people that, they think that we're doing a great thing for them, and they're doing a great thing for us and for our guests. And that's, that's why I said before about eudaimonia. It really starts with finding the right people. This is already in their heart, and then live that out.
Perfect. I mean, and because the other ones are a little bit not as necessarily directly connected to you as the Hope Initiative, but what's been the feedback from employees and customers about the Hope Initiative, and has it kind of driven sort of higher footfall, better business results, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so it's really wonderful that we're blessed to have a type of menu that people don't get sick of and they frequent. So we have really high loyalty and frequency from our guests, sort of as a baseline.
Yeah,
and I think, to your point though, the Hope Project, and when they get to tell them where the herbs come from, and they get to meet Daniel, who's one of our famous special needs staff. And be able to meet them, then it illustrates and cements the relationship we have with our guests. So absolutely, the guests love it, becomes a source of, social media posts. And and real connectivity between the guests. So yeah, absolutely. It's been a really important part for them to be able to see how we're living this out. It's absolutely become a part of when people think about Tazikis, they're also mindful of the Hope Project as well. Mm-hmm. And our motivation is not, this is not a PR stunt, and it's not to drive commerce. It's very much just living out who we are. And if you're going to do this for a long time, you got to love your work.
Yeah.
And that sort of yields its own fruit.
Perfect. So Dan, just want to bring it sort of together. I mean, because this is, you've had this is really broad sort of experience. But if I was to kind of to say to you, you've done this, you've created this concept, and you've expanded it, and then you've added on the Hope Initiative as well as the other initiatives that you mentioned. But ultimately, we're talking about relationships with customers, building a better experience for them and the employees. I mean, but for somebody that's listening to this or reading the highlights, and they're thinking about, I'm looking for inspiration or instruction or motivation in order to deliver a better experience to their customers. I mean, what would be your best advice? What should be the top 2 or 3 things they should do?
So first thing is, you need to go on your own journey to find your version of eudaimonia, right? So, and I think sometimes to find our best future, we need to go back to our genesis, our beginnings. Mm-hmm. And I think, Simon Sinek talks about start with your why. So if you don't know what your clear why is, what your clear purpose is, it helped us a lot to realize that, profit is one of your outcomes. Profit is not your motivation. Your motivation should be deeper, more anchored, and fundamentally a little bit more cause-based. And then when you do that well, one of your outcomes is, you contribute to your community, you provide jobs, you create profits for your shareholders, your investors. So I think having a right relationship where profit is positioned as an outcome and not a driver, and that your driver is your purpose, your why. And so I would say, get anchored in what your why is. And if you know it, then double down on it. Make sure that is how you're telling your story, how you're hiring your staff, and constantly be asking, are we really living this out? Don't just assume that you are. And then hire based on that to make sure you have people that align with it. And then a lot of things, are easier downstream when you stay anchored in a clear purpose and let profit be an outcome. So that would be my first thing. I think the second thing around any business, certainly food, but really any industry is, and then decide what corners you won't cut, right? They say oftentimes you're defined by more so what we say no to than when we say yes to, right? Sure. So I'm very entrepreneurial. I love to innovate. I'm a creative person. And so I've had a lot of fun at Tazikis because we're taking an amazing brand and making it better. That's a lot of fun. But a lot of it is also to say, we've made the decision to say, we're going to make food from scratch. Now, that makes our food cost a little higher, makes our labor cost a little higher. And so we've made an intentional choice around that, and we've not compromised. And when other brands have compromised, it helps your bottom line a little bit in the beginning, and then over time it erodes. And so I think really being anchored in, all right, what are the corners we're not going to cut, and being faithful to that over time. The last thing I would say around guest experience would be just something as simple as just paying attention, something simple as eye contact, and recognizing, I think cultivating empathy for this idea of this person might have had a really crappy day. Or this person might be going into a really difficult meeting. This person has a teenager. We know teenagers are challenging. Developing empathy and presence when we interact with someone. So it's not just transactional, and it's not just refilling their drink, but pausing for just a second. It doesn't take any longer. We're not losing any labor time here, but it does make all the difference in the mindset of our staff and how we interact with people. And then it goes from not just being an action, but it goes to being a feeling, something that people can feel. And the currency of paying attention, I think, is just kind of a lost art, and such a simple thing to regain.
Perfect. I love that. So thank you. So one final thing I wanted to ask you, and something we talked about just before we started the show, is that I was explaining that I just published a new book called Punk CX, and I've been saying that I've been doing some ongoing, if you like, social research on the back end of these interviews, because I've been asking people for two questions. And the first question is, what one or two words would you use to describe a punk approach to customer experience?
Yeah, so I'll repeat the one I just said, presence, and I'll add spontaneous.
Fantastic. And obviously, other than your own brand, Tazikis, what other company or brand do you think epitomizes a punk approach to customer experience?
So, the one that first came to mind is Nordstrom's, the retailer, clothes retailer, just because their staff are really empowered to do whatever it takes, and they go to great lengths to make sure that you're taken care of and any problem after the fact. And so there's not this levels of bureaucracy where you have to check with a manager. Everybody that's there is empowered to take care of the guests. But I've got a better example. My wife and I recently took a trip to Tulum, Mexico to celebrate our 19th wedding anniversary with two of our best friends. And I had not really been exposed to really, I guess, true Mexican cuisine and higher end Mexican cuisine. We went to this one restaurant called Negra Rosa, and we went in and we were just having some fantastic margaritas. And I heard the music speeding up behind me, and I recognized, oh, there's a DJ actually curating this music, and it started getting faster and faster and faster. And so you're like, okay, something's about to happen. Like you could just tell viscerally without anyone telling you. And before I knew it, all of a sudden the music gets so fast and the lights go off. And then I watch all of the staff have these like white sleeveless hoodies on. They put up their hoodies, and then when the lights go off, they hand everybody Roman candles, and suddenly this place is now lit up with, like, it felt like you're in a room full of fireworks. I had no idea this was coming. And granted, all of that was, one could say, contrived or curated, but what it was intentional. They wanted to evoke in us an experience and a feeling that was unexpected. The thing I really want to speak to is what happened next, which was unprompted. Everybody just stood up in the middle of their appetizers or meal and just started to dance. We were having this dance party with our Roman candles going out, and for like 15 minutes we just had this dance party where it wasn't now just the four of us at our table. Everyone was interacting with each other, and we had this very spontaneous, wild experience. And I've never experienced anything like it. Again, it was thoughtful, it was intentional. They were hoping that they would evoke something. In this case, it evoked dancing. And I thought immediately when I heard and read about your concept of Punk CX is what an amazing example of just so, there's nothing corporate about that, right? Yeah. Their goal was joy. Their goal was experience. And I think if we can embrace more of that in anything that we do, is to create a reaction, create an experience that's a little more lasting. Like I said, not just happiness, lasting happiness beyond the meal, beyond the transaction. So love the concept of Punk CX.
Thank you so much, Dan. That's what a fantastic example. And thank you for sharing that with us. So finally, I just want to say, congratulations on the success so far with Tazikis. I really like the idea of eudaimonia. I think the Hope Initiative is a fantastic thing that you're doing, and it's a real challenge and call to action for other businesses around there to do more. But lastly, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your time and your insight and your experience with us today. That's been great.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks so much for engaging in the conversation.
Well, that's it for another interview. I really hope you enjoyed it. Now, every time I complete one of these interviews, I learn something new, and I try and incorporate that new learning into my writing, my speaking, my workshops, and the consulting that I do for my clients. If you're interested, you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinsko.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do listen in again. All the very best.